Greetings, this is Ron Smalek, and I'm reading Catching Fire. This is the second book in the Hunger Games trilogy by Suzanne Collins. I'm reading the book and giving you my thoughts on each chapter in groups of two. Hope you enjoy. Alright, so this is the first portion of my Catching Fire notes. Before I begin, I wanted to follow up on something that I mentioned in chapter 27 of the Hunger Games, and that was Suzanne Collins' other book series called the Underland Chronicles. I went and looked it up on Wikipedia. It doesn't appear to have anything to do with the Hunger Games, and I'm not going to cover it in this series. It actually doesn't quite sound like a series I'm interested to read at this point. Alright, that put aside, Catching Fire is divided up into three parts: the Spark, the Quell, and the Enemy. From what I have read so far, it is still written in the first person, and it is still written in the present tense. But the sentence structure overall seems to be more complex. When the first book started, I had remarked that most of the sentences were very short and very straightforward, and they seem to have evolved. I don't know if the author did that on purpose or if her style just grew as she continued writing. But let's dive into part one, the Spark. So chapter 1 starts off with Katniss in the woods, and apparently it is about 6 months after the games have ended. I say this because she talks about not looking forward to the Victory Tour, and she basically says that the Victory Tour happens in between, roughly in the middle of each of the Hunger Games, which happen annually as far as I know. The reason she's not looking forward to the Victory Tour, in fact her whole district isn't, is because it's just a reminder that they are under the Capitol's thumb. She is out in the woods because she is hunting not for Prim and her mom, but for Gale's family, and we find out that Gale's family's last name is Hawthorne, which we did not know in the first book. Now this actually had me worried for a little bit because I thought, what happened to Gale? But apparently he has gone to work in the coal mines, and he works 12-hour days, so they don't see a lot of each other except to go hunting together on Sundays. And even though they've resumed that, their friendship to a degree, there is definitely a distance between them. It seems, obviously the events of the game changed Katniss, and Gale is, being a little bit cautious as well. Just a couple notes. She goes into talking about how Gale excels at creating complex and delicate snares with tripwires and branches that snap and things like that. So hopefully that'll come into play in the book. In fact, I'm not sure what's going to happen, if there will be another Hunger Games, if she's going to have any part of it or not. I hope there is. That's what I really want to see in this book. I hope it doesn't go into political stuff, but we'll see. So Katniss is actually choosing to live in her old home, which the family keeps, while her mom and Prim live in the Victory Village. So Peeta lives in the Victory Village. It didn't mention if he lives with his parents. He might be living there alone. I'm not sure, actually. Haymitch is there, and Katniss is there. I'm sorry, Katniss's mom and Prim are there. But Katniss is living in her old home. And the other thing I wondered at this point in reading, which hasn't been answered yet, I think, is I'm wondering if Katniss still has the tracker in her arm that they used while she was in the games, because that could come back to be a problem later. We find out that the explosion that killed Katniss's father also killed Gale's father, and that was, I think it said when Gale was 14, and that's when he stepped up to take over, providing food for the family. Of course, Gale would have provided for Katniss's family if she would have died in the games. That's why she's taking care of his family now. And Gale doesn't want to accept the food that she gathers, but Gale's mom doesn't have any problem with it. Katniss goes to the Hob. She buys a variety of items from all different stalls because, of course, now she's rich. But she's spreading her money around as much as she can, because she knows that the people of District 12 pooled their money together while she was in the games to try to get her some sponsorship. So she's very grateful for that, but she also sees it as another debt. If you remember in the first book, she kept talking about her debts to different people and how she never really pays them. So she's kind of hard on herself there. Now she has the whole town in her debt. Um, the other part about that is that, and this comes a little bit later in the chapter, but there is something called Parcel Day, which apparently happens once a month, where everyone in the district that has the champion gets a parcel, like food, applesauce, I think she said, in cans, or something else. But everyone, there's that one day that she thinks makes it worth it for winning the game, because the whole village is really happy on that day. So while she's in the Hob, I found this a little bit surprising, and I'm not sure if this is going to go somewhere later or not, but she's mingling with a couple of the peacekeepers, joking around with them, almost as if they're still part of the district. Now, I don't know if peacekeepers come from the capital or come from each district. That might be interesting to find out. But they do remind her that she's supposed to have capital pride, and I'm not sure if one of them is being sarcastic or not. So it's interesting. We also find out that the capital, obviously, while she was in the games, having her dramatic love story with Pita, everyone back home was basically knowing that she used to have this relationship with Gale. So the capital made up a lie that Gale was her cousin, and not her best friend, because they didn't want anything to get in the way of their drama. And so now anytime they're on official camera or interviews, Gale and his family are there because they're cousins. So she's dealing with that. She does go to the Victory Village, because I think at noon they're coming to get her for a victory tour, and Haymitch has told her to come wake him up prior to that. So she goes to Haymitch's house. It is a dump, and he is drunk, and I guess I'm kind of surprised that he had this complete relapse. I thought that at the end of the first one he was going to actually, his relationship with Pita and Katniss would keep him a little bit more normal, but I guess he's back to it. This is where we finally see Pita for the first time, and I'll be honest, I'm really glad that at least for the last 6 months they didn't continue their relationship and become an item. Pita, I think, basically just went back to the village and started baking. So Katniss feels guilt, sadness, and fear when she looks at Pita. She also feels longing, but it basically said that that's not going to be strong enough to overpower those other emotions that she feels. So it seems like Pita and Katniss are kind of done. Of course, they have to pretend to like each other on the victory tour, but I'm hoping that this doesn't turn into more of a relationship book. But if it does, so be it. Katniss, therefore, is very formal with Pita when she interacts with him, and President Snow arrives. Now, in Chapter 2, I have less notes. Basically, we do find out that the head game master from Book 1 was named Seneca Crane, and that was the person. Actually, I'm not even sure if we're told if it was a male or a female, but in any case, it is strongly implied that Seneca Crane was executed for basically being the one to get sentimental and make the decision on two victors. I like it the way they showed more of that in the movie than in the book, but it's not a huge issue. We also find out that while there has not been an uprising per se, the president knows that uprisings are brewing, and he basically is making sure Katniss knows that he knows what's been going on. They're on their guard, and he could have her killed at any time, or her family, or Gale's family. We also find out, and this was interesting, that at some point during one of their hunting trips, Gale just grabbed Katniss and gave her a kiss, and it only happened the once and didn't happen again, but he just couldn't stand it anymore. He said he had to do it at least once. And They haven't really resolved their relationship after that, but at least that is planted. Um, when the president gives Katniss some advice about keeping up the charade with Peeta, she thinks she's just going to have to be kissing him and holding his hands, and the president basically tells her aim higher, which implies that she's going to need to ramp it up and really convince the districts, because there are people in the audience that saw through her charade and didn't really buy it. And then he also reminds her, or tells her, that he knows about Gale's kiss, so that's kind of like a veiled threat. So that's it for Chapter 2. We have, I believe, been now reintroduced to all the main characters, and the stage is set. I believe Chapter 3 is going to start with the commencement of the Victory Tour. See you then.